everybody, hope you're doing okay. Welcome to a place called Upper Yield. Now, I thought I hadn't done a running Shoeoff video for a while, largely because I've been injured for a bit, but I think I'm now okay to do like a slow Shoeoff. So I've got three of Nike's most popular daily trainers here. We've got the Pegasus 41, beloved by all YouTubers to actually slag them off, although I've done 200 miles in them, so not too bad. Got the Vomero 17, which apparently are the serious version of the Pegasus. The Pegasus is sort of good for like people who run once a week, and the Vomero is for proper runners apparently, and the Pegasus Plus, well, that's for people who can't run more than about 6 miles because they've got low stack. Although looking at these, they do look sort of fairly high, don't they? So what I thought I'd do today is 6 by 1 mile in each of these shoes twice over. Not try to race this, just to sort of run at a sort of normal easy pace, just to see which one works best for me and to see if I can detect any differences. Now, the Vomero 17 and the Pegasus 41 are a kind of similar weight, although just picking them up now, the Vomero does feel just slightly heavier, if anything, but it does have the ZoomX in it, Michelin with the cushion as well, whereas the Pegasus 41 is pure React X and the Pegasus Plus is ZoomX entirety. So the Pegasus Plus is definitely the lightest of the three shoes here. And will it be the easiest to actually run in? I'm going to probably do around about 8:30 pace. I'm going to try and run a mile circuit at exactly the same pace each one and have a look at all the data: heart rate, ground contact time, vertical oscillation, ground contact time balance, because I'm interested to see if I'm balanced or not. And just to see what actually of these three shoes, which actually works best for me. Now also with the Pegasus 41, I've been using these body partner insoles, which have got really enforced arch supports. I've had Achilles problems recently, so I need to basically have a bit more arch support. So for the Pegasus 41 runs, I'm going to do one in the normal insoles and one in these. These are a lot heavier, so they actually put the Pegasus 41 around about 430 grams compared to about 370 odd that they are normally. So it's quite a difference. Now it's interesting that all three of these shoes have actually got exactly the same insoles, obviously with a different colorway there. They've all got basically the MR10 lettering on them, if you can see that if I put it close up. So basically you're kind of feeling like, although the different shoes with different foams, you've actually got exactly the same insole. So that sort of like immediate contact point with your foot is going to be exactly the same in each shoe. So what I'm interested to see as I run around, if I can detect which one is sort of feels differently. I do remember the Vomero 17 has that sort of squishy ZoomX feel, and the Pegasus Plus, they were saying it's a bit firmer, so I'm interested to see how they sort of compare. And the Pegasus 41, well, I mean, I think it's a shoe that some people think is only good for like walking. I've done a lot of walking in this, to be fair, a lot of walk runs. So at the moment, I'm perhaps a bit of a casual runner, should we say. Right, which one shall I choose first? I think what I'll do is I'll finish off with running in the Pegasus 41 with the body partner insoles in last, because that would be with a heavier shoe, will I then sort of like start to feel it. So let's go to the Vomeros first, then I'll go into the Pegasus 41s. Then I think I'll go into the Pegasus Plus, and then I think I might repeat that to save the shoe changing again. And then I'll basically go back to the Vomero and then end with the Pegasus 41. Oh, in case you're wondering, I've also got my Nike Pegasus Trail 5 GORE-TEX shoes on, just as sort of something to wear where I do this little introductory clip. If you want to check out my video on that, well, I do the customary running through Fords, please do so. I'll put a link up there. Okay, the Vomero 17s on my feet. They definitely feel like the plushest of the three, from what I can remember. Definitely the plushest tongue, I would say. Next plushest being the Pegasus 41, and the least plushest being the Pegasus Plus. Although all three of them are plush in their own way. There's quite a lot of padding relatively for a fast shoe at the back of the Pegasus Plus. And there's a bit even more on the back of the Vomero 17. And similarly on the Pegasus 41. So yeah, they're all kind of an ilk, I would say. Not a shoe for necessarily going fast, although you'd hope obviously for the Pegasus Plus to be the fastest of the three. But as I said, I'm not trying to go fast today. I'm just trying to fill this out and see if I can actually get through 6 miles of running. Okay, so this is where I'm going to start from, Upper Yield Village Hall. And if we swing around there, I just filmed that opening sequence over by the football pitch there. And a bit of grass. There was a chair there, but I thought it was a bit dark maybe. And then I'm going to run up here. It's like about a 0.8 mile circuit, and then there's a little roundabout up there, or very minute roundabout. So I'm going to sort of do that extra bit from here to there, just see if I can make it up for a mile. And I'll try and run the exact same course each time and use racing activity each time after the first one. So I don't want to go too hard on this one, I'll have to run the same speed as the rest of them. And will I have enough time to do this before it gets dark? Well, hopefully. At least I've got my nice yellow top on, and it's pretty quiet around here, so should be okay. So rather nice English countryside quiet lanes. I'm doing about 8:30 pace, I would say, so slightly downhill. So I don't want to go too fast on this one, as I said. I actually want to get through each of these 6 mile runs. Vomero 17 feels a lot softer than I kind of remembered. So that would be interesting, especially as I can compare it to the Pegasus 41 next, which I think it will feel perhaps a bit firmer, but we shall see. So for reference, I did 8:09.51, so say 8:10, an average pace of 8:17, so just a fraction under a mile. Average heart rate 122, max heart rate 136, so a bit higher than I perhaps hoped to get, but I want to sort of give this enough rest now to be sort of fully recovered. Pegasus 41s are on, which according to some YouTubers is only good for like people who run once a week and maybe a bit of walk running. Well, that's probably been me of late, so I have to see if that's any good. But I've done over 200 miles in these now. And I do find that these are a great shoe to look at as well. When I go running sort of like at dusk and you put a pair of these on, it feels like instantly you're going to be seen. I think at the moment this is my favourite shoe of the year, just because of the fact I've actually put the most miles in it now, 200 miles. Although the average speed of those 200 miles hasn't been overly good. But yeah, maybe I'm just sort of now a casual runner who just sort of does a bit of running and a bit of walking and stuff like that. Instantly they kind of feel slightly looser, maybe because I'm just so used to them with those replacement insoles, and they do feel like a pair of old slippers now at 200 miles, so maybe that's a factor, but they don't feel quite as plush as the Vomeros on foot, although as I said they are a lot older now, and the foam, well, it's not going to be quite as squishy as it, because it's not really the Zoom X, it's more this React X. So in a way maybe that's sort of tending to more like a sort of a faster shoe in a way, just a bit more responsive, shall we say, in inverted commas. I also think with the Pegasus, like, it's often a shoe you see on the feet of elites. I've seen Lara Muir running in them. I'll put up a few clips just to sort of show you who I mean, some of the best athletes in the country and if not the world. So yeah, if it's good for them, maybe it's also good for these sort of like hobby joggers like myself who could barely run at the moment. But anyway, let's see how we go with this second one. I think I'm fully recovered now. Okay, so the Pegasus 41, just so much more ground feel. I can see now why people who perhaps have never been running too long find these Pegasus sort of odd, because so much more connection with the ground, but they do feel, to me, faster than the Vomero, even though it's kind of serving a similar purpose. That dog looks a bit big. Okay, so it's definitely slightly harder effort heart rate wise in the Pegasus 41, but it was my second run, wasn't it? I did like a little walk before I did the first run, so those first run of the Vomero is kind of like almost from fresh, so when we look at the stats, need to bear that in mind. I was probably about 3 or 4 seconds quicker. I just sort of like let that one ease out a bit. So going to try and control this again. I've got the Pegasus Pluses on now. I think I would say straight away that the kind of in between the Pegasus 41 and the Vomero for kind of softness, just walking about, but we'll see on the run. The Pegasus Plus kind of feels like the widest. I feel like just got a bit more on this. I think that's one of my slight disappointments with the Pegasus Plus over the Turbo 2. Just widen that base, maybe because it's full Zoom X, they always have to do that. Like in the Invincible they did that, didn't they? Make it quite a wide base. And the Alphafly's got quite a wide base, I think, and then they made the wider base in the Vaporfly. So kind of why I sort of hark back to the Vaporfly 1, because it was like a traditional sort of like narrow racing type flat with just a bit of higher stack and then some. But yeah, so with a narrow foot and a long foot, then perhaps not ideal, but we have to run with what we got. They can't really build custom shoes for me. I'm not really the equivalent of Usain Bolt, a 57-year-old sort of like never has been runner, is there? The good thing is that I'm actually able to run. Although my heart rate's a bit higher, it does feel like I'm actually running. Having said that, I've only done 2 miles and I've got another 4 to go. And I think we'll just about get this done in sort of some vague daylight, but as I said, there's no real traffic around here. It's really quite idyllic, really, actually. I have to come to do a session around here when I've got a bit more sort of fitness, shall we say. Right, enough yapping, let's get on with it. Okay, the Peg Plus, I definitely feel that they are sort of in between the Vomero 17 and the Peg 41, the sort of softness feel, which is slightly surprising, isn't it, considering these are all Zoom X, and they're perhaps a fraction less stack. I'll have to check the exact stack heights. I'll probably say that I'm having to hold myself back ever so slightly in these, although talking to you now, I feel my heart rate going up. I also find that I need to keep myself in a straight line. Any slight deviations, and I'm feeling they're not optimum. So maybe in a shoe that I wouldn't feel ideal for track sessions or anything like that. Although for me, I think they're too much of a shoe for a track session. But yeah, nice and straight line, keeping going. I think it helps with my Achilles as well. Just don't have those sort of twisty turns, because it's also into the ankle as well that problems have been having. And I'm now 7 seconds ahead. So yeah, just goes to show that perhaps these are the fastest of the three, as you'd expect. But equally, I'm now the loosest, aren't I? So there's that as well. Okay, so the Pegasus Plus, I'm about 3 seconds quicker than I was in the Pegasus 41 and about 2 or 3 seconds quicker than the Vomero 17. So I think there's an element here, I'm feeling slightly looser. I'm having to almost control myself. So, but I did notice, I think that the Pegasus Plus definitely felt the sort of the easiest to run, like slightly hard, quicker. They're all relatively, of course, I'm just doing over 8-minute miling. So I'm going to keep the Pegasus Plus on now and do my fourth one, save a shoe change. I'm going to try and do that against the Pegasus 41. So see if I can really control this effort, get almost identical times. I did notice the max heart rate with the Pegasus Plus was slightly less than it was on the Pegasus 41. Not sure I can read too much into that. Just as I said, I'm starting to feel just a bit looser, and maybe yeah, just sort of getting into this more and getting back to the old running. So that's good. I think my cycle training is kind of helping. I put up 2 videos on my FTP test. One did quite good views, and one was my worst video ever. So I'm not quite sure why one appealed and the other one didn't, because I thought the second one was actually sort of the harder one. But yeah, sometimes it's just the way YouTube goes, isn't it? Right, let's get on with this one now. I think I'm nice and recovered, and I got 3 more to go. A bit of light left, and yeah, crack on. So we're out on the 4th run, second run in the Pegasus Plus. I'm currently 3 seconds ahead of where I was in the Pegasus 41, which is about as identical to was in the last Peg Plus run. And so they definitely do feel the fastest in inverted commas shoe, where they should be, because they're in my size about 40 grams lighter than the other two, and I've got the premium, fully premium Zoom X foam in it. But certainly don't expect a Vaporfly without a plate for a lot cheaper, and it's a lot more shoe, I'd say, than the Streak Fly. So if you like the minimal Streak Fly, then this is kind of similar-ish, but for me 100 grams heavier, and I think you do notice that. But yeah, for a lightweight sort of inverted commas daily trainer, I think it's fine, especially on little routes like this, which are pretty much flat and nice good surface. I do find I'm feeling my toes just ever so slightly, but I do tend to sort of toe off a lot on my toes anyway, so any shoe that kind of accentuates that is good. I think that's why I don't really like these maximum rocker shoes. It feels like all connection with the ground is kind of gone. Let this car go by. All right, we're 7 seconds up again, which is exactly where I was when I talked to you on this lap last time. So I'll put the camera down, and then we'll just ease back around the rest of this loop. Okay, so now we've got the Vomero 17s back on again for the 5th run. Just a bit enough daylight to get this done, I think, but I've got my torch with me as well. Definitely feels so much more plusher in these, so I'm interested to see how they feel, the extra weight, and just feel the extra sort of softness in them, which isn't necessarily what I always want. I think a lot of people these days craving for these ultra soft maximal shoes, and yeah, fine if you like that, but don't sort of say a shoe's good or bad just because it's got like masses of squidgy foam in it. Is that actually going to be better for your running? Is that actually going to be better for what you like to run in? I certainly noticed when I was running in the Peg Pluses there, and to a certain extent also the Peg 41s, that having that sort of like relatively more ground feel just felt like I was floating on the ground better, even like a 8:10, 8:15 pace. So interesting to see how we get on now then. Okay, running in the Vomero 17s, holding both arms up, so I won't do this for too long. I think I'm actually just sort of slightly looser now as well, because although these do feel slightly harder in relative terms, I'm actually seem to be flowing along quite nicely, which is a nice feeling to have. Okay, so Vomero 17's done. That's the fifth and final one to go. This time in the Pegasus 41, I've got the arch support insoles in, which add about 40-50 grams to the shoe. Instantly kind of feels like I'm sort of on a bit of a rocker because I feel that sort of like through the arch and a bit higher raise. So I've added about 100 grams in weight compared to the Pegasus Plus. So I'm interested to see whether I can run at all in these. But yeah, last one, got my torch with me, and yeah, nice bright yellow shirt, so it's rather open around here, so crack on, get this done. Okay, they're all done. I did a little warm down as well, so 6.6 miles, something like that altogether, which is very pleasing. Apart from the 7 miles I did in the Pegasus Plus, that's my longest run in about 3 months. Yeah, no, I feel all right actually. The last one in the Pegasus 41 plus the arch support insoles from Body Partner, definitely feel like you've got a lot more shoe on there and a lot more sort of rockered, and yeah, I think sort of perhaps better for walking in a way, a bit more support there. When running, I kind of felt like I was rocking back on my heels a bit, but yeah, it kind of changes the nature of the shoe quite a lot. It didn't feel like it was quite as low to the ground as it does with the standard insoles in, but then you sort of notice the fact that you're sort of more on the higher heels. But I got going fine. It's interesting sort of going back into them, I've sort of often got used to the more normal shoes, as it were. But I think when I looked at the times, they're all pretty much, especially the last four, all pretty much within a second of each other. So race activity is working quite well for me there. And interesting to see, I think I might have had the slightly highest heart rate in the Pegasus 41, but there's a little rise to finish up here. And I think that sort of, depending on how hard you hit that little rise, may just sort of bump the heart rate up a bit. So we'll have to bear that in mind when we look at the data. Okay, let's go have a look at the data now inside in a moment's flash by magic. Okay, so here's the spreadsheet. So just a reminder of what I did, just under a mile. I think next time I run that course I just need to start back a bit, and so I can run just a bit further. So the times here were just slightly quicker than the pace. So I started off with the Vomero 17, went into the Pegasus 41 with the standard insoles, Pegasus Plus twice over, Vomero 17, then finished with the Pegasus 41 with the Body Partner insoles, which add basically 50 grams to the weight and give me more arch support. So I think the acid test here that I actually managed to, first of all, I was very pleased to actually run 6 by 1 mile without too much sort of discomfort. I got through these quite nicely. Perhaps the nice rest helped. I mean, I had a good average of 6 minutes rest between each of the miles. I think by the time I'd spoken to the camera and changed shoes, etc., and I wasn't trying to race this. And I think other than the first two, I got this pacing spot on. Like the last four there within a second of each other, and the other two were pretty similar as well. So the average pace there was around about 8:12, 8:13, 8:15, something like that. And the heart rates, I think, kind of showed that there was a very marginal sort of like indication that Peg Plus was the quickest here. Because if you look at these heart rates, I think you always have to bear in mind with these tests, when you look at average heart rates, then the first one is always going to be the lowest because you're starting from fresh. I didn't really do any running before the Vomero 17. I just did a bit of walking just to sort of get myself a bit looser. So the average heart rate is always going to be less. But what I've also done is I've put the average heart rate for the second half of the mile, which I think is perhaps a better indicator because that kind of takes off any bias to a certain extent in what you were doing for the run. So you can see here that when I went into the Pegasus 41, the second one, and then it's sort of like, you can see it's sort of gradually rising. That sort of max there was perhaps a bit of a misnomer. I think I just pushed a bit hard when you saw me with that dog and that went off. So I think that spooked me a bit. So you can see here that the average heart rate for the second half of the Pegasus 41 standard run was actually less than it was in the Pegs Plus, even though the max heart rate was 6 beats higher. So yeah, sometimes you've always got to look at these data with a bit more integrity and thoroughness when you really try and draw conclusions. But what I would say, in the second Pegasus Plus, then the average heart rate went down, and I think it sort of bucks the trend a bit here. So you'd expect these average heart rates and second half average heart rates to slowly rise up due to heart rate drift, even maybe not quite as much as normal. But don't forget, I'm not very fit at the moment, so this sort of pace was probably more in the upper half of steady than it was easy. I think this would be kind of my easy pace when I was a lot fitter. So, but equally, having run this sort of fairly sort of decent pace, it felt like I was actually properly running, and I'm giving these a decent test for the sort of running I would like to do as daily trainers rather than sort of out and out race shoes or session shoes. Because if I was doing this in a session, I'm probably looking to do these around about sort of 6:30s or better, which then puts on a completely different complexion to the things. So yeah, I would say definitely that the Pegasus Plus offered you a very slight marginal performance gain. But what's interesting, that even I went to shoe with the body partner insoles, almost adding 100 grams in weight, I wasn't really sort of like struggling. I managed to do the same pace. It just felt slightly harder, and it was the last one that the heart rate sort of went up a bit here. But yeah, you kind of think, well, even though I've added 100 grams of weight, I can still run. Well, I did also think actually that maybe I'll stop wearing those insoles, because I didn't really think it was actually helping me to any great extent. I think they're better for walking, so I think if I do walking, I'll have them in. But running, I just find them sort of like slightly a bit odd, and it's sort of almost like you rock back on your heels a bit more. So I think if I can, I'll be better off sort of running naturally. So let's look at some other stats here. The powers from Garmin. I've kind of given up my stride. I never really find that it actually tells me much. And sure enough, other than the first one, which is slightly slower, all of these powers are all basically the same. So if you can't read anything into shoes from this power here, because they're all basically the same, and it's just basically essentially a function of how fast you went. What I did think was interesting, the vertical oscillation here was highest in the Vomero 17. Now, sometimes you think, was that just a coincidence? But thinking about it, that is perhaps sort of the bounciest of shoes, inverted commas. And it did feel like the most sort of softest. So you could sort of see that there was some evidence of that coming out in the data. And the Peg Plus and the Pegasus 41 Standard were perhaps a bit more ground feel, just slightly lower stack, or sort of like a lower stack feeling. I definitely feel I could feel my toes more in the Pegasus 41 and Peg Plus than I could in the Vomero 17. But even the Vomero 17 had a bit of sort of feel compared to, say, Invincible or something like that. And you can see that the ground contact times here were all fairly similar. I can't read any differences here. Now, it's interesting with the ground contact time balance. I was kind of expecting the right number to be a lot higher than the left, because I've got the problem on the left leg, and I thought I would be sort of like leaning over to the right. So this is interesting that perhaps I'm not sort of having that sort of conscious bias away from my left foot, even though that's the one that's sort of like the stiffer one. So yeah, I'll have to look at that in some other runs, but I'm kind of rather surprised to find I've got a left bias there when the left foot is the one that's causing the problems. Normally it would be the other way around, and you would want to sort of like put all your weight on the other foot and try and carry those sort of sore legs. So perhaps that's encouraging to show that I'm actually getting better. Cadence here was interesting. I think perhaps the fact that there's high vertical oscillation, the cadence in the Vomero 17 was slightly lower, although it was the first run and it was slightly slower, very marginally. According to Garmin, the stride lengths were all pretty much identical, weren't they? So yeah, it's hard to sort of read too much into this. Maybe on the last one, I felt like I was working just a bit harder. The cadence was just a bit higher in the Pegasus 41 with the heavy arch support insoles, but yeah, not too much you can read into that. And then I got a 174 cadence in the Peg Plus and a 176, so you can kind of see that even in the same shoe there's a bit of variation and there's a bit of experimental error here. But cadence, it's interesting because normally I sort of think of myself as quite a high cadence runner, but at this speed I'm perhaps not such a high cadence runner. So in a way that's quite good, because I feel like I'm then able to stride out a bit more, or relatively, if you count 1.1211 when it's striding out. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if I tried a bit harder what would happen at the moment. But I think at the moment I'm just being cautious. Load here is the load from Garmin. It's interesting that sort of shows a bit of a drift up. Not quite sure you can read too much into this. I mean, again, the slowest one and the lowest heart rate was in the first one. So if this is all pace and heart rate related, it's kind of logical that sort of slowly rose up. The last four there, you know, the pace was identical, but maybe the average heart rate was just sort of creeping up. So that explains why that was just a notch or two higher. Max heart rate for me at the moment is around 162. My height is 195, or about 6'5", so I'm pretty lanky. And my weight's a bit higher than it had been before the injury. It had been down to about 73. It's crept up to about 75.7 at the moment, so it hovers around 76. So I'm just trying to make sure I don't get too many cakes and stuff. But I'm pretty skinny anyway, aren't I? So no great problem. I was, I think, down to 69 when I did my 2:33 marathon, best part of 20 years ago now. But I think I could get back there if I really wanted to, but I think I'd have to stop eating cakes and curries and ice cream and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, maybe having a bit of extra weight helped. I don't as ill as I ever used to. I used to get all sorts of colds all the time when I was in my 20s. Maybe it was before I got married, so maybe Sue's looking after me better now. These are all the Strava links if you want to look at them. But I think the acid takeaway from this, that there isn't too much in it between these shoes. I think certainly this sort of notion that the Pegasus 41 isn't a proper running shoe, well, that's kind of rubbish really. I mean, I think it's sort of people that
maybe haven't been running very long and only used to sort of soft high stack shoes and claim they can't run anything where you can actually feel the ground. Well, and also I think, you know, people say, well, the Pegasus 32 and 33 was fantastic and the Pegasus 41 isn't so good. Well, you're kind of thinking, well, you're not really comparing like with like, are you? I mean, I bet if you wore a Pegasus 32 now, you think it's the worst shoe ever. So I think deja vu is often a very bad thing. I think the Pegasus 41 is certainly one of the better ones in recent times, and I think to a certain extent they get better each time. Whether it gets as better compared to other shoes is again something very much personally to you, but I think if you want a sort of a shoe that doesn't change too much and is very neutral, it allows me to put in those orthotics if you want to do that, is comfortable, is good looking, yeah, you can walk in it, you can run in it, you can do a bit of walk run. It's got a decent outsole for a bit of road to trail as well. So yeah, all in all, I think 3 shoes here that if you put your mind to it, you can run just as well or not as well in either one. And yeah, sometimes I think you perhaps need to look at yourself more than your shoes in terms of how good you are as a runner or how far you can run in a shoe, etc, etc, etc. So I hope you found this interesting. Like and subscribe with that, and see you in the next one then. Bye.